Senators passed legislation today that would change how liability is accrued for companies that violate the state's Biometric Information Privacy Act. It requires companies to get consent to use employees' biometric information such as fingerprints under the current law. Now, every time an employee right now uses their fingerprint to punch the clock or enter a restricted area, the company they work for could be held liable if they did not get consent. The bill would change damages based on per person.
We can ensure that companies are held accountable when they break the law, but also to ensure that the punishment fits the crime, that we are not putting a company out of business because of an honest mistake that they made.
Opponents argue it doesn't go far enough since it does not have retroactive protections for previous violations.